Hagerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Bessent, it's always great to have you here.
Good to see you, Senator.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't get someone complimenting on the great work that you and your team are doing at the Department of Treasury. If you'd like an extra moment to respond to Senator Van Hollen, I would be more than welcome to.
No, I think he speaks for himself.
Okay. Well, Secretary, over the years, excessive and misguided regulation distorted markets and imposed undue cost on the American people. I'm particularly concerned about this dynamic in our banking system. As you and I wrote together in the Wall Street Journal, Dodd-Frank sought to end, quote, too big to fail. But in fact, it created a regulatory environment in which community banks are, quote, too small to succeed. Policy errors have entrenched the dominance of the largest banks and made it even more difficult for community banks, which lack the market-distorting perception of being too big to fail. For smaller banks, the result has been a bloodbath. The U.S. has lost 3,600 community banks since 2010, nearly a 50% decline in the community banks in our state, in our nation. Secretary, I proposed bipartisan legislation to increase the deposit insurance limit for non-interest-bearing transaction accounts. This is not a wholesale increase in the deposit insurance limit. It's a narrow reform targeting only non-interest-bearing accounts, typically payroll accounts. How does this bill, this targeted expansion of coverage, fit into the administration's vision for supporting community banks?
Senator, as you know, I, along with you, am one of the great, and another member of this committee, they are a great advocate of this because what we have seen is depositors, investors believe that large banks have an implicit guarantee on all of their deposits during a time of crisis, during a stress event. As we saw in March of 2023, deposits flee from small banks because they are not believed to have that implicit guarantee. Mm-hmm. So if we can have an account for which small businesses, normally their payroll accounts, can deposit funds with the surety that they will be returned, then it will stop that deposit beta, allow Main Street to flourish. What we have seen since the great financial crisis, due to overregulation, 50% of community and small banks have disappeared. And that is what is harming Main Street.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I think that's precisely why the National Association of Community Banks have supported my legislation and the legislation you and I wrote about in the Wall Street Journal. Last year, Mr. Secretary, President Trump signed my bill, the Genius Act, into law. Private sector estimates suggest that stablecoin adoption may reach between $1 trillion and $3 trillion by the end of this decade. As you know, the Genius Act requires stablecoins to be backed by high-quality liquid assets, such as U.S. Treasuries. How does the U.S. leadership in crypto and stablecoins fit into Treasury's strategy for maintaining the dollar's role in the center of the global financial system?
Well, Senator, I want to congratulate you and your colleagues, both sides of the aisle, but thank you for your leadership on this. This can be an important source of funding for the U.S. government as we push down the funding for the U.S. government that helps everyday Americans, whether it is for mortgages, or any other borrowing requirements, keeps taxes low. And we believe that with the U.S. having the safest, soundest, best practices, we can draw in new sources of funding via the stablecoin mechanism.
Mm-hmm. If you think about the impact of the passage of the Genius Act, it was a major statement in terms of keeping innovation on shore. And I'd just like to get your perspective in terms of the stability and clarity that we provided with the Genius Act and what that means for keeping innovative capacity here in America.
Well, it's innovative capacity in digital assets, and remaining the leader in that is imperative. And what we don't want to have are central bank digital assets, which we are seeing in the rest of the world. And Senator, as you and I have often discussed, we are going to see a choice between American private sector assets with our best practices in regulation, or between central bank digital assets, whether in Europe, whether in China, in the rest of the world. And I think the world is going to choose the U.S. dollar and the private sector well-regulated choice that U.S. stablecoins will provide.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I think that underscores my sensitivity to not undoing ex post facto the good work that we did in Genius. I want to see us put in place international reciprocal regimes that work. I want to increase the demand for U.S. Treasuries as you do, and I'm going to encourage my colleagues to preserve the Genius Act, given all the hard work that went into it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Thank you for your leadership, Senator.
Thank you.